So I don't know if I gaslit myself or was somehow gaslit elsewhere, but I went into this movie thinking that it was found footage. And so a lot of my anticipation and excitement around seeing it was based on that. Um, but if you didn't guess by the intro to this video, I quickly found out that it is not found footage. I even went back and watched the trailer, thinking that maybe the trailer convinced me of that, but it is clearly not found footage in the trailer. So I don't know. But that, of course, is Shelby Oaks, which was just released on October 23rd. So Shelby Oaks was written and directed by Chris Stuckman, and I believe co-written by his wife, Sam Liz. This, I guess, is a big thing in the horror community that he was a critic. I did not know that, and I wasn't really familiar with him prior to watching this movie, but this was his directorial debut. A woman's desperate search for her long-lost sister falls into obsession upon realizing that the imaginary demon from their childhood may have been real. So starring in this movie is Camille Sullivan. She plays Mia, who is the elder sister to a woman named Riley, who 12 years prior to the setting that we have and we follow in the movie, she had been running a paranormal YouTube channel with three other people, and they had gone missing while filming in a ghost town called Shelby Oaks. And the three co-stars were later found brutally murdered, but Riley, the sister, was missing and remains missing till present day. And this premise had me sat in the theater. I do love a good like paranormal mystery. And I guess where probably I had this idea that it was found footage is that a lot of the clues in the investigation that Mia's doing come from the tapes that were recorded as part of this paranormal channel, YouTube channel. And what gets the story started is a mysterious man shows up to Mia's door and blasts himself, and he is found to be holding a videotape that says Shelby Oaks on it. And so when Mia watches the tape, it kind of sets off this chain of events that we follow her exploring throughout the movie. And so this is a supernatural horror with some occult stuff sprinkled in. It doesn't have very overt themes. I believe that, there is a little bit of trauma, obviously, and, some other themes that I'll definitely talk more about in spoilers, just because it is central to like the main plot twist. And aside from that, I didn't get like too many overt like allegories or themes in this one. So because my thought of this being found footage was not completely unfounded, we do get some found footage elements in this movie, which really was very effective for me personally, although it did cut away. So there's scenes where Mia is watching the footage and it cuts away from some of the like more gory, violent scenes, which I was like, maybe we wanted to see that. I don't know. So that, I mean, there were some effective like shots in that sense. The movie itself, once it goes back to just like regular movie, I guess, did have some very like visually appealing cinematography, a lot of like long shots in the woods, some really cool drone footage of the ghost town of Shelby Oaks. I think I would have preferred it to be entirely found footage, just because there are some sequences later in the movie that I believe would have been more effective showing less. And I think that's something that found footage does really well, is just kind of insinuating, which for me can be a lot scarier sometimes than just like overtly showing something. So my number one issue with the execution in this movie is there's some pretty shoddy looking CGI, And I don't mean to harp on this because I know that this was a low budget movie and most of it was crowdfunded. And so there's, there's some limitations with that, obviously. But what I will say is that I think a lot of the time, what I love about indie filmmakers is that their low budget forces them to be like creative with the amount of practical effects and like practical locations. And there were just a couple of things in this movie where it was very clearly CGI and like the kind of CGI that it takes you out of the suspense of the moment because you clock it and it's like, oh, like that is a fake, insert whatever it is. I'll talk more about it in spoilers, but it was just a bummer to see that. I really was hoping that, again, I thought it was going to be found footage, so I thought that there was going to be more practical elements, and that is clearly my fault, user error. But I was just bummed to see this kind of like cheesy CGI in this movie. As far as acting goes, I think Camille Sullivan did a great job. She definitely carried the movie. I do think there were some unfortunate portions of the movie where she was sort of just breathing a lot. It was a lot of like pause in silence, heavy breathing, which I don't think was her fault. Like she did it very effectively, but I think she did a good job of portraying what was asked of her to portray. But some of the blocking, I guess, some of the like, the quiet moments where she wasn't interacting with anybody or speaking to anybody, it was just a lot of the same kind of reaction. The other performances were good too. I think the acting overall was an effective part of this movie. Another thing I struggled with is that this movie, as far as the frights go, relies very heavily on jump scares. There's a lot of like very, very quiet moments that turn into an immediate, like loud, suspenseful, jump scare. And I don't mind a good jump scare, but this one felt like a little excessive. Like they were leaning a little bit too heavy into the jump scares. Um, the visual effects, like the visual scares, there were some creepy moments. One of my favorite things in horror movies is to see just like a figure standing quietly in like a doorway or a window or something. And there were a couple instances of that, which is always effective for me. So it definitely was tense in moments. There were some like spooky visuals overall. The horror elements felt a little cliche at times, just things that we've seen in a lot of other movies. Um, and it wasn't very gory. There were a couple scenes, like I mentioned, in the found footage part, but they quickly kind of jumped away from showing that and focused more on the face of Mia as she's watching the tape, which I want to see it. I want to see the gross stuff. I want to see it. Don't take it away from me. Um, so overall, not super effective for me in terms of scares. Okay, so going into spoilers now. If you are interested in seeing this one and not being spoiled, it is not found footage, but go and see it and come back and watch the spoilers of this video and let me know what you thought. If you watched to the end of my Black Phone video, you know that I was feeling really guilty about harping on that movie so much. And I said that I would turn it around going to see Shelby Oaks because I was really anticipating it. And unfortunately, I can't really be positive in this video either. And I don't like to do that, but I I didn't enjoy this movie. There were a lot of things about it that I didn't enjoy. I think the letdown, knowing that it wasn't found footage, was my fault, arguably. But um, I think the introduction was very well put together. It really drew me into the movie. It set me up for something that I felt like I was really on board for, right? Like the premise, I think, was really cool. I was down for it. Um, and it just became sort of cliche in the end for me. So initially, once this event happens where this man shoots himself in front of Mia, and then she starts sort of looking at stuff surrounding Shelby Oaks. I love a good, like, hardcore obsessed lady scanning through a microfiche, like that. I mean, it's very like The Ring, right? And so that's the issue with this movie, is that every little piece of it I can point to another movie that kind of did something similar. And this movie, while these things get repeated because they're effective, this movie just repeats these things but doesn't add anything new or interesting or like a different perspective. And so it just ends up being cliche for me in a lot of different ways. So, as this procedural kind of ticks on, we find out that the man who shot himself was the person who killed the co stars on this paranormal show, who abducted, presumably, Mia's sister. And so that becomes part of this story where Mia is, talking to people who knew this man, and you get a lot of just, again, like cliche kind of like interviews, one with the warden who makes these like broad, very dramatic statements about there was something wrong with this man. um, and eventually, she visits the jail that this man was in, which was neat, and I liked the setting. But this was one of those instances of like the cheesy CGI where she pulls up to the building and it is clearly a CGI building, and it was just so disappointing. Like, I don't know, it was just very clearly like, okay, well, that's fake. Um, and there were a few other things that were very clearly CGI, like the hellhounds, I guess, that were part of like the omens around whatever demon is sort of haunting this family. Um, Again, just clearly CGI. They did have the Mike Flanagan like reflective eyes, which was cool. Like, you could definitely see that, again, that inspiration there. Um, and just, I don't know. So she goes to the jail, she sees some spooky stuff, and ultimately, it turns out that Riley had been having dreams kind of associated with the timeline of this man, and that their family has been seeing like these demonic silhouettes, um, for most of, especially Riley's life. And so it's like something's been following them, whatever it might be. And so Mia ends up in the woods and happens upon this house. And then you get another like horror cliche with like a decrepit old woman, being spooky and creepy. And in a moment where she's not looking, the old lady, Mia happens upon a scrapbook, I guess, that essentially, it's like an instruction manual. Like very blatantly shows like everything that's happened, in like a picture book, like step by step. Again, just feels like lazy storytelling to me, where I wanted to find these things out, of course. Like, I wanted the mystery to be solved, but to just like slap it all together in a book, that shows step by step like what's happened in the last 12 years, right? So essentially, this woman and her son, which is the guy who shot himself, who initially killed all the other people and kidnapped Riley. So they did some sort of demonic thingy where they got her pregnant and have been holding her in the basement for the last 12 years. And so, in a very anticlimactic series of events, Mia rescues her very easily, obviously easily. And they go upstairs, and the decrepit old woman performs some sort of ritual, and there's a baby. And then everything is like resolved nicely and neatly in that moment, where like the woman does her little ritual, she dies, and then Mia's able to take Riley home and also takes this baby. And the hospital has no issue with that. They're like, yeah, that should be fine. Take the baby, sure. And it feels like this all happens within the span of like 5 hours. I don't know if it's longer than that, but it feels like 5 hours. Um, and you just get this unnecessary scene where Riley tries to kill the baby and everyone's supposed to be surprised, but I don't know. And then Mia throws her out a window, and it turns out that she's been like possessed by this demonic thing to like raise this demon baby. Um, and it just, I don't know, like the third act was just filled with cliches. There wasn't anything interesting or intriguing about the visuals for me. Um, the decision making seemed dumb and rushed and way too convenient. Um, and I just like it fell so flat. What started out being so promising and, you know, intriguing just ended up being just like this um like sticker pack of like, here's a little bit of Barbarian, here's a little bit of Rosemary's Baby, here's a little bit of, Hereditary. And there were so many little sticker book elements like that, and it didn't come to its like own cohesive, unique whole. It just felt like, again, like it's like the the scrapbook all over again. It's like taking all of these elements of a horror movie that should be effective and slapping them together, and it just ends up having like very little heart, I guess. I don't know, like the goofy CGI plus the sort of like lackluster plotting was just, it let me down. And I do hope that, that, because there's something there. Obviously this person has an appreciation for horror, and I can see that. And so I hope that Chris Stuckman kind of takes whatever feedback that he gets and uses it to maybe refine his directing a little bit. It didn't feel personal, and I think a lot of these like kind of trauma related horror movies, like these bummer supernatural horror movies, they have an element of something real in them, and this one felt like it was trying to be something without like giving an inch of itself, if that makes sense. um, and I don't, like I said, I don't like to shit on people's art because I think, everyone, I don't think people set out to make bad movies. I mean, some people do, but I want to, I want to appreciate the artistry of what he was trying to do, but I just didn't like it. I didn't like it. So I am giving this one a 2 out of 5. I think that was also what I gave Black Phone to. I'm hoping that there's going to be some gems before I close out the year, because I don't want to end. I don't want to end on this note because there's been some really great movies that came out this year. So I don't know. We'll see. So hopefully you forgive me for doing 2 hater videos in a row. Um, and hopefully, the next few reviews will be a little bit more positive. But I appreciate if you've stuck to the end of this video. Please follow and like and subscribe to this video. I'm on Instagram, Letterboxd, and TikTok as well.